During the month of July, we're having some social media offerings that we're just calling intersections. They don't fall in any easy category. They are sort of at the intersection of our spiritual health, sometimes our mental health, sometimes relationships with people, relationships with technology. It is also about our brain and how our brain works and how our life flows with God's grace. So all of those things just create a intersection. And so welcome to Intersections. Good morning. My name is John Roy, and I'm joined today by Dr. Heath Lowman.
Yes, sir.
All right, got it right. All right. And we're gathered together today to talk about mental health, social media, adolescents, and children. So don't know where this roadmap will take us, but we're going to touch all of those bases.
Yeah.
All right, so Heath, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, about where you trained, and tell them where you're from.
Gotcha. So I'm originally from York, South Carolina, but now I live in Greer with my husband and our son.
All right.
And the kind of like expertise I bring to the table here is twofold. So one, when I was in the Marine Corps, I worked for the National Security Agency and the Central Security Services, and that's a big signals intelligence industry, for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. And I was there from 2008 to 2013, really at the birth of social media and smartphones.
Okay.
And the intelligence work was exploiting that technology, right?
All right.
So that's one side. And then on the other, since leaving the Marine Corps, and actually while I was in, I started, you have all these secondary jobs when you're in the military. Mm-hmm. One of my secondary jobs was a suicide prevention officer.
Okay.
And that set me on a path for mental health. So after my own struggles getting out of the military, I finally got my master's in social work from the University of Southern California.
Okay.
And just this past December, I graduated from Tulane University with my doctorate in social work.
All right.
And I have been practicing with teens and families for the past 3 years, and for the past 4 years before that, I was working with adults with schizophrenia.
All right. And what's the name of the practice you work in?
Beauty for Ashes Counseling.
Beauty for Ashes. And that's in Greer?
It's actually in Greenville. We just moved from Taylor's to Greenville. We're right across the street from Bob Jones.
Okay.
And we moved in literally May 22nd to our new facility.
All right. So beautyforashes.com is where?
Beautyforashescounseling.org.
Okay, .org. All right. And you're originally tell them you're from South Carolina.
Yeah, I'm from South Carolina. I grew up in York, and then I moved around. I lived in Mississippi and Connecticut, moved back to York, finished high school, got my undergrad at Winthrop University.
All right.
That was philosophy and religious studies.
What year did you graduate from Winthrop?
2007.
Okay. All right. So let's just now jump into it. All right.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, let me ask you this before we jump into it. You have a doctorate in social work from Tulane. All right, we just went over that. The difference between a therapist and a psychiatrist and a psychologist. Walk me through that, or walk them through that.
Yeah, for sure. So started at the top tier. Psychiatrists are, it's really the oldest mental health profession, and what they do is prescribe medication. They're the only medical doctor in the mental health field. Okay. Psychologists are not medical doctors. Social workers are not medical doctors. Okay. They're the folks who can prescribe medication and really started the whole mental health endeavor.
Okay.
And then you have psychologists. And I wouldn't say this is a step down, it's a tier across.
Okay.
Psychologists measure your perception, your consciousness. They look at the parts of consciousness that are not always aware to us, but are part of our brain.
Okay.
Right? And then you have social workers, licensed professional counselors, marriage and family therapists, and even pastoral counselors. These folks are the frontline kind of talk therapists. And they're the clinicians that you'll work with when you go for mental health help most of the time.
Okay.
And really, I'd say that these different professions work best in concert.
Right.
They work best together.
Okay.
So if you are talking with a therapist They may say, hey, you should check out a psychiatrist for their medication. Or like, let's check out a psychologist so we can measure like how much is this affecting you.
Okay. Good guidance. Thank you. So let's just jump in now. How do you define social media?
Man, that's a huge question because like really all media is social. Like if you think back to like plays, it's our first form of media, even like paintings in caves, like it's a social act. So the media is like the conduit for socialization.
Okay.
And in our terms now, I think most of us think of that in terms of social networking sites, and that's what the literature calls them, SNS. But that excludes things like video games who have multiplayer platforms, or things like Discord, where you have like these chat rooms and it's like immense openness, or the comment section on any news story ever, YouTube.
Okay.
It's huge to try and like narrow down what it is and what it isn't.
Okay.
And even in the literature in the past like 5 or 6 years has varied in how they define what is social media and what is not. But typically I would say it's anything you're doing to connect with others that's mediated through some kind of screen or device.
Okay.
It's almost like a prosthetic
Right.
for socialization.
So I'll ask, TikTok, social media?
Definitely.
Instagram?
Definitely.
Facebook?
Definitely.
All right. Is texting social media?
Oh, I would say so. If we have like a big latitudinal definition for social media, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So teenagers involve themselves in all of these things. How is it affecting? What's the research say how social media, and maybe even you can drift into COVID, how is this affecting adolescents?
Man. Really, I think one important thing to say before you dive into like a big topic like that is that the research that's out there is inconclusive because our definitions are so skewed. Like we don't really know what we're doing in creating these programs. We don't know, like as a society, as a human culture, we don't understand the impact of these things. They're kind of we're going along with it as they happen.
Okay.
So like how it affects people and how that appears in scientific literature is indeterminate. There seems to be a link between increased anxiety and depression and the time spent on various forms of social media. Some studies will say there's not a connection at all. Some will say there's a weak one. And it's just like we have poor definitions for social media and mental wellness and mental illness. Like we don't have really good definitions for what those are. And as authors and researchers change those definitions from study to study, or they come up with their own definition, it makes how we understand it inconclusive. Okay. Right? So I want to start with that.
That's fine. That caveat has been introduced.
Yeah. And then I think another thing to look at is like how the brain develops over time.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So take your hands like this. This is great. This is a great thing to do with kids. This is a great thing to do with family members, anybody. Okay. You take your thumbs, put them on the inside. It's almost like the church and the steeple. Right?
Okay.
Fingers together, hands together. This is a fairly good brain model.
Okay.
You've got a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere, and you've got 3 main parts.
Okay.
Right? And all brains, they grow from the bottom to the top and from the inside out.
Okay.
So you have at the top layer what I'm going to call the prefrontal cortex. It's a little more complicated than that. There's other stuff there. But this top layer is what makes humans human.
Okay.
Like this is what's unique. Our ability to decide, to critically reason, that's where that is. Okay. And if you go a layer lower, where this little thing is, you could call it the hippocampus. And you can come along with me if you want to, or you can relax.
I'll come along.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm invested this far.
Yeah, there you go. So the middle part is where our emotions and memories are. Okay. Sometimes called the limbic system, sometimes just referred to like this, the hippocampus. Okay. All mammals have this. So like whales, pandas, everybody. and it's our ability to remember and assign emotions to stuff.
Okay.
At the base,
So you're telling me animals have emotions?
yeah, oh yeah, and memories, and they relate in the same way.
The squirrels in my neighborhood do not seem to remember the card. But anyway.
Maybe they're more like the Geico commercial squirrels.
Yeah.
They're just like waiting, like, yeah.
All right. Back to our subject.
Okay, so you go a layer down.
Okay.
And you hit the amygdala, the thalamus, and the hypothalamus.
All right.
The amygdala might sound familiar because
Yeah.
that's the thing where you've heard the fight, flight, freeze response.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's responsible for that.
Okay.
Right? So the thalamus is the thing that receives information or experience of the world, and then we feed it to the amygdala.
Okay.
And the amygdala decides, is this a danger or is it safe?
Ah.
And then it moves on towards integration. This is like basic brain function.
Right.
And we're born with pretty big brains, like it's, across all species. Like we have the biggest brain when we're born,
Okay.
right? And we do so much development in utero and to the 3rd-year-old age that most of your personality, most of who you are, is already there.
Okay.
It's a matter of refinement. And it's immense. The brain is just like soaking up every experience that happens,
Okay.
and it's integrating it and creating a mind and a personality and a person. And after 3, that process kind of slows down, but it keeps going. And that goes until about the age of 10 or 11. And then that kicks back up, but then we're entering a new period of human life, puberty and adolescence. And some very interesting things happen in adolescence. So we're gathering that information all the way up to 10, really powerful at the age of 0 to 3. And then in puberty and adolescence, this interesting thing happens called pruning. So the brain begins eliminating neural pathways so that we start to have things like an identity and a stronger sense of who we are and where we belong in the world and how we get to be who we are.
Okay.
Right? Some other wild things happen, like our lust system activates, and our ability to anticipate and measure risk goes down.
And this is when we cross into adolescence.
Correct.
It's 12, thereabouts. Okay.
So a child before puberty may be very cautious and refer to their parents for like, am I safe? Is it not safe? And an adolescent is programmed essentially by their brain to like ignore the risks of activities. And they're like, yeah, no, let's do that.
Well, and they wouldn't learn anything new. None of us would learn anything new if we weren't able to turn that off for a little while.
Right.
I mean, because we'd all just sit on our hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got to figure out, like if you're skateboarding, you got to figure out whether or not you can land the kickflip down the stairs, or if like this is not what you can really do. And if you're cautious, you just won't do it because you understand you'll scrape your knee, right?
Right.
So we have to like embrace risk. There's actually a psychologist by the name of Jonathan Haidt that has a brilliant.
It's the guy that's University of Virginia. No, NYU.
Yeah.
Okay.
He has this concept called anti-fragility. I think over the past few years we've indulged in this idea of resilience, but he proposes using this idea of anti-fragility instead, and I think it comes from a researcher in the Middle East named Nassim Yassam, I think. I forget his name because we don't have a word for this in English. But the idea is that there are things that are fragile, like wine glasses. You hit it, it breaks, it's gone forever. And there are things that are resilient, like lead. You can hit it, you can poke it, you can burn it, and it's still lead. Humans, according to Jonathan Haidt, are anti-fragile. The more that we're hit and struck and messed with, the stronger we become.
Okay.
So if you think of like a banking institution or a business or even a church or a nonprofit, they start weak and small. And the more they're exposed to the community, they grow and they become stronger, so much so that they can be too big to fail.
Right.
Like, those are real things that have happened in our world. And people are the same way. When we encounter risk, struggle, and strife, we learn how to deal with it.
Okay.
Right? Okay, so that's the deep lecture
that's
on like human nature and adolescence and how we kind of like engage with the world.
Right.
So some other pieces that go with adolescence and socialization is that we pivot from our families to our friends. So who are our friends and how do we interact with them? And suddenly they become more important than our families are.
Okay.
Right? If you ask a teenager, someone about the age of 14, would you rather hang out with your mom and dad and brother and sister or with one friend? They will definitely say one friend.
Right.
And I don't know all kids.
And they're embarrassed by parents too.
Very much so.
Yeah. They'll drop me off down the street.
Yeah,
Don't come in.
Yeah. Even if they're really cool, it doesn't matter. My old son reminds me of that all the time. It's like, yeah, you can do backflips, but don't go to the trampoline park. Like, you have to stay over there. So social media it seems like it would be this great thing for teenagers, and they're really, really, really drawn to it because they're able to connect with other people. But when you are with another person, like I'm with you now, versus people watching us, we are connecting.
Right.
So there's things that are happening in your brain and in my brain. There's something called mirror neurons. So it's actually like the right hemisphere of my brain and the right hemisphere of your brain are starting to mimic each other.
Okay.
And they're looking at like how your face moves and how I move and how the tone of my voice makes you feel and how your questions make me feel, right? And having this kind of like connection is deeply biological. But when we're on social media, those things aren't activated in the same way, right? We don't really know what mirror neurons are up to when folks are online or watching a screen or something like that. But we do know that the processes that people go through while they're on social media are much more involved with themselves, right? So there's something called the self-referential network in the brain.
Okay.
And that's the ability of your brain to assess what you have said and done and experienced and regurgitate it back into the world, or to understand things in the view of yourself. And when you engage with texts or online posts, that's what you're encountering is your own set of experiences, as opposed to being deeply connected with someone in a physiological sense.
All right, let me stop you there. Probably a decade ago, I never heard this word. Now I hear it almost daily from people that I work with. I overthink things. That sounds to me what you're saying there, to me, is that I don't have you, the partner that I'm talking to help me evaluate how this conversation is going. All I have is the text that I have and the text that you've sent. And it's all inside of me. I just continue to look at it and I overthink it because this is the only thing that I have any sort of control over. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
And I think that if I'm 59 and doing that, or if somebody else is 49 and doing that, that's one thing. But if you're 14 and you're doing that, and you don't have enough experience to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, then I can see where that would really drive you. Why are they not texting me back? Did I say something that offended them?
Yeah.
How could that be misunderstood? What did I say? I don't know. You know, does that make?
It becomes a deeply anxious experience.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. So what happens when you're with someone is that like my rate of breathing affects your rate of breathing. You can detect whether I'm calm or I'm mad. You can even detect like if I'm genuinely smiling or if I'm like fake smiling. So let me give you an example.
Okay.
Right? So I can smile like this.
Yeah, that's a fake.
Or like this. Right? And you can see like even my posture changes, my belly, my back, my butt, my face, especially the top part of my face. You start to see that it's not just something that's here, right? And if I say something like, "You like that red shirt?" and then it's like, what does he mean? You just have the text. You like that red shirt?
Yeah.
You like that red shirt? And just the text.
Right.
Do you like that red shirt? Then you're met with, well, what does this mean?
Right.
Because you're missing so much of the social interaction, right? And it becomes a very anxious experience because you don't have information, right? And that's what leads to anxiety.
Right. I can see that, yeah.
Yeah. And anxiety is like, it's a natural thing. Anxiety, depression.
There's enough anxiety that comes along with adolescence.
Oh,
on
yeah.
a normal day.
Yeah.
And now we've seen social media seems to up that a bit. I don't know, how we would quantitate it.
Yeah. We'll see that's kind of the thing. It's like there's a benefit to that because your ability to empathize and understand what another person could think is growing. your ability to experience someone else going through those emotions is not happening. So like your ability to think about it has increased, but your ability to be with it is absent.
Okay.
Right? And that's where the disconnect can come from. And then if you have these like rampant thoughts, and then you're trying to give all of these thoughts your emotional attention, then that can come off like an experience of anxiety.
Okay.
Right? And then there's things that, so we have self-referential networks in the brain, and then we also have comparison networks in the brain, which are really, in the case of social media, self-referential, right? Because when we compare with someone, we're looking at what's presented to us on a scroll or a feed or a video, and we're not seeing the whole picture or being with the whole person. And so we start to compare what we lack in comparison to this very finite picture of what a whole person is.
And what adults are able to do is, adults have had social media for the same amount of time that adolescents have had it. And so what adults are able to do, I think, is they're able to say, I know that person. And I know that this is all a sham. That they're able to look down the scroll there and they say that I know them. I've had dinner with them. That's not who they are. All right. I don't think an adolescent has that ability. And that way, if I'm not comparing, if what they're showing me and what I am doesn't compare favorably, by at least knowing their history, I'm able to feel better about myself because I know that really that's all just for show. That's for their mother to see.
Yeah.
But if I'm an adolescent, I don't know that. I mean, I don't know that person so well to know that is really phony because they're not. Maybe I go to Clemson and they go to USC, and I just don't know them real well, and they just come up on my feed, and I just think, well, their life is perfect, and my life is crap.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really something that deeply affects adolescents and maybe even more so kids, because their only real example of understanding the fluidity of emotions that a person goes through during a day is their parents. Sometimes their siblings, but even your interaction with your siblings is not the same as your interaction with your parents.
Okay.
You become emotionally attuned to your parents in a very real way. If they're sad, or even just like a subtle movement of an eyebrow can change how safe a child feels.
Okay.
Right? And so if your sample of all the things you know about human behavior is two people, and then you go online and you see all these other people, it's like, oh, I'm radically inadequate. I don't measure up to all these other people doing these incredible things. And that's also in a vacuum. Right? So that's kind of the risk of it. But there's also an incredible benefit that comes from that, is the ability to actually connect with these people, or when you find something that you are invested in or an adolescent is invested in, they're able to see that same interest reflected in the world. So that can actually be a very powerful thing. And in some cases, even a life-saving thing. So, for instance, the 988 crisis line also has a chat mechanism for teenagers and adults or anyone who's feeling like they have a mental health crisis or experiencing suicidal thoughts. And the ability to connect with someone, even if it's only text, when you feel that desperate, is life-saving.
Okay.
Or if you think about children, adolescents, and even adults who are gay, lesbian, transgendered, they may not have community. They may not have people with them, right? And they feel isolated and different and exposed compared to their families. The ability to connect with those communities online, in many cases, is very life-saving.
Well, and that's life-saving, and I'm not going to minimize that, but I do want to just a tangent that came to my head, is that I was on Reddit the other day, and there's a whole subgroup of people who love Legos.
Oh, yeah.
And you could just be a person who has a really, like, you have this habit, and you're thinking, I don't know anybody else that really has this habit, and so you feel kind of odd or alone by yourself, but you go on something like Reddit and you discover there's this whole community that just loves Legos and builds all sorts of things out of them. You get ideas about what you can build, you share your ideas of what you've done, and I think that's a positive thing.
Absolutely. there's whole aspects of culture and sport that have been created through the use of social media. Especially if you look at like video sites going back to even E-Bomb's world, if your folks even know what E-Bomb's world is.
Don't know that I know.
It's old school pre-YouTube YouTube.
Okay.
Right? Because of video platforms like E-Bomb and YouTube, the sport of parkour came into existence and has been refined into international competitions and possibly even like an Olympic competition from something that only existed in one tiny French community.
Really?
Has now become an international phenomenon. There's even like a huge parkour gym in Greenville.
Really?
Motive School Movement, and it's also like the one of the owners of it is also an incredible YouTube star because those things go hand in hand so well together. These like I don't know, and it's whole communities, whole groups of people are able to connect and find each other through social media.
All right.
So it's not just the doom and gloom, and anytime you get on it, you're putting your brain at risk.
Yeah.
Right. There's also incredible benefits that have literally changed the world. You look at things like the Me Too movement. All of the kind of election dramas that have happened over the past 10 years.
Well, I know that sitting here talking with you, I forgot there's a camera here. and we do need to, because of the time limit, I need to fast forward a little bit.
Yeah.
So if we were to get down to, before we talk about parents and what parents can do, thus far we've said social media can be beneficial or it can be destructive. Do you have any, or has the community brought forward any sort of best practices or ideas about when you're an adolescent or when you're even a child, how much of this do they need to be exposed to? And I know that you may not be comfortable giving a time. I understand that. I just know the kind of people who watch this think in terms of, well, do I need to limit my child's use of this, or do I need to monitor it, or things like that? So you got any thoughts on that particular subject?
Yeah, of course. So again, but like best practices, we don't know because the field doesn't exist. Right? We're creating it as we go along. But I can tell you, like personally, things that disturb me. I have a family member with a daughter who is a year and a half. Her favorite toy is a fake cell phone. That's all she wants to play with. If she doesn't have it, she cries.
Wow.
Throws tantrums. And it's not connected to the internet, but she's conditioned to use it, right? And I find that really disturbing. Like
well, I know that we don't want to go down another tangent, but you think about you got a 1-year-old, you got a 3-year-old, and you got two parents sitting at a table, and you got to figure that both the parents are late 20s, early 30s. What are they doing?
Yeah,
they're looking at their phone, and so the kids see that the parents are looking at the phone, and they think, I don't know what that magic little box is, but when I'm able to hold one, I'm going to be looking at it too. So
absolutely.
So I do think modeling good behavior, like no cell phones at the kitchen table, or whatever sort of parameters you want to put around it. But modeling is an important thing, and that's a hard thing for parents to do.
Yeah.
Because their work wants them to be sort of attached 24/7.
Yep.
So parents have to make. They want to say that it's the kids' issue, but it's really the parents have to model something in front of them.
Yeah, I say it's a family and society issue.
Okay. So that brings us to, what can we, I guess the question is, what can we do?
Yeah.
Okay, moving forward, what can the adults in the room do?
Yeah. I think that, like you said, the first and maybe most important step is for parents and adults to take an honest assessment of themselves. How often am I using this? When am I using this? What's going on while I'm using it, right? Like, do your kids see you use it, and for how long, and for what reason? And also, like, you can take that a little deeper to, like, what emotional reactions do you have to your use of your phone?
Yes.
So your kids are watching. Like I said, like even just a subtle eye twitch can cause a kid to lose their sense of safety. How many times do you get angry because of what you see on your phone, or stressed, or worried, or gasp, or change your breathing, or furrow your brow. Like each of those has an impact on whether or not your kid feels safe and connected in the world that they're in.
Okay.
Right? So on that note, interestingly, our society, American society, has never been safer. All of the crime rates are down. The three leading causes of death are obesity, traffic, and suicide.
Okay.
We don't pose a great deal of danger to each other. And yet we've never been more anxious.
That's true.
We've never been more afraid of each other and our kids going out into the world and being a part of the world. And it's because of the information we receive from the little black box, right? The school shootings, all that kind of stuff. So as a parent, taking an honest look at yourself is the place to start.
That's a good place to start. Just, all right,
Yeah.
Mom and Dad, look at yourself. Are you overusing the phone? Is it having negative impact on your life? Should you limit your own use of it? Instead of limiting your child's use of it, you limit your use of it.
Right, absolutely. And really just kind of learning about how you use it and learning about it by itself are, I think, two of the most important things you do.
Right.
And then
ignore the children.
No, never.
They're going to be
come in.
They're going to be screaming. So just y'all bear this.
Us the nature kids. Kids
make
do
noise.
sometimes.
They are noisy things.
They are.
All right. So what else can parents do?
Creating family media plans. Okay. So in May, Dr. Vivek Murthy, the American Surgeon General, came out and gave this huge warning to American society. They're like, hey, like we need to pay attention to this, and we need to do something about it. So the Department of Health and Human Services and the American Association of Pediatrics have both released separate family media plans. Both of them are great, and it's really just kind of a template that you can use to figure out like what would be appropriate. When do I need to use it? And I'll say that the American Association of Pediatrics, theirs is like a flow model that you can do on your phone. Like you enter your family members' names and their age groups, and it will spit out like, this is, what are your goals? Like, do you want to limit your time? Do you use it for work? How do, like, what's the way you want to go?
And these resources will be at the end of this video, and you'll be able to access them.
Right? Yeah.
Continue. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Because they need to be accessible. So, no, like learning about it, learning about yourself, and having a media plan. And once you've done those things, it's time to include your kids in on it. So, from 0 to like, let's say 7 or 8, I would say they don't need to be in on the decision making about what to do, right? Yeah. And from there, maybe it's time to start including the kids a little bit about like, hey, mommy and daddy are thinking about like how we use our phones and how we use the video games, how we use the Xbox. And we want to create a plan on how we can do this better. Once they get a little older, it might be time to start including them on some of the stuff. Because teenagers need that kind of agency. They need the autonomy. They need to have some influence on what their life looks like, because they're going to do that no matter what. Right. Yeah.
And I was sort of schooled with, give an adolescent 2 or 3 choices that you can live with, and then let them pick from a menu. Yeah. Saying, here's the way we could go forward with social media. Plan A is this, plan B is this, plan C is this. Which one do you prefer? Yeah. And that gives them some agency, but that's just the school I was sort of initiated in.
Same school.
Okay, all right.
Same school. I think that's a great way to do it. Is introducing kids not only to social media but to their own autonomy.
And eventually, it's going to be self-discipline.
Yeah.
I mean, and the more I live, the more I realize how much self-control and self-discipline is so important. And when parents micromanage their kids until those middle adolescent years, the kids don't use that muscle.
Yeah, no.
And so when you start asking them to use that muscle, they'll start using that muscle, and they'll start seeing the ill effects of it. You know, I was on social media too much and I didn't prepare for my test and I made a C. I don't like making C's. I want to make a better grade. Well, they'll connect the dots. It may take a semester, but they'll connect the dots.
They
Or
will.
I believe they will.
Yeah. Failure is how we learn,
Yeah.
right? And getting a C is not a failure. I try to explain that. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And I feel like for a lot of folks, they feel like it is.
Well, you know, I need to have you come back and we need to talk about grades in school and so forth. Now, we're up to wrap this up, and so I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to kind of take the last word, I guess, Dr. Heath. I read a book, I cannot recall the author's name. It's called Breaking Up with Your Phone. I think I told you about it on the phone one day. And she used an illustration of WWW as 3 questions that you ask yourself before you use your phone. And I don't remember the first W and the second W, but the third W I remember. And it is, what else could you be doing before you use your phone? What else could, because so many times we just go to our phone out of boredom. Yeah. And this is adults, not children.
Oh yeah.
And this is what the kids are seeing. So the kids are saying, they're saying, Mom and Dad are bored, and when Mom and Dad are bored, they turn to their phone.
Yep.
What else could you be doing? Go out in the garden, plant something, go get some ice cream, go play something, get a board game down. There are 1,000 other things to be done.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And kids love doing all those things with their parents.
They do.
And parents do enjoy their kids. Well, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you again next week. All right? Bye.